Good evening, everybody. Off to kind of a abrupt start there. I accidentally shut down the feed when I was trying to switch out the video. No worries, though. Just head right into the current conditions, and there you see winter weather across the northern tier states, all the way from the Dakotas out to New Hampshire, Vermont. Got winter weather advisories for that whole area. And we pick up a purple in Chicago. That's going to be a winter storm warning there. And that's that frontal system moving through the northern plains right now. We remember from the previous webcast, we had a big dome of high pressure across the northern and Midwest region. And we've got very strong Pacific systems starting to move with a very strong zonal flow. And those are basically carving right into that dome of high pressure. So there it is on the surface chart. The wind flow kind of paints out exactly where that low is. Pretty much around the Rapid City area. Got a 1006 millibar low, actually a 1003. Still out there in Wyoming. And it's poised to move eastward there. And if you look at the temperatures, you can see a pretty significant difference across there. 30s there in all of Missouri. Cross over into Illinois. Pick up 22, 17, 13. So that's an area of frontogenesis right here along that warm frontal boundary. And also that upslope flow, or yeah, I guess it would be upslope, but it's actually isotropic lift north of that warm front that is generating some of those showers and clouds. Okay, let me check on the feed here, look at the comments. Sue says we're buffering at the intro point. That might have been me accidentally shutting it off, but I know just before we went on, I had seen the network acting up just a little bit. So if we have problems, I'll restart it in a bit. But I think we're probably okay. Elsewhere around the country, here in Texas, you saw on the opening clip, got a lot of stratus and stratocumulus covering Texas. That's also a bit of upward, upslope type flow over the surface of the southern front. And you can see it lurking just off the Gulf Coast there. Lots of 70s and 60s just offshore. And we've got that front kind of banked up to the mountains of Mexico. Maybe looking at something like that for the frontal position. So north of that, southerly flow developing there. And when we have a humid air mass and that lift over the frontal boundary, we're going to get clouds. Southeast U.S. looking pretty quiet this afternoon or this evening. 40s and 50s, pretty cool there. And then up in the northeast, just kind of a cold air mass. They're just waiting for that system from the Midwest to move their way. And things will look a little bit unsettled out to the west. A lot of clouds and 30s and 40s out there. So we do have the Pacific storm track working across that area. And I remember from last night's model runs, we were seeing about 3 or 4 systems that were getting ready to head inland. The SPC charts here, I'm not going to go into the sectors, but pretty good satellite loop behind there, or radar loop, and you can see the lift north of that warm front here. And this is indicating some of that Pacific energy in Nevada and Utah and the Sierra Nevadas. And we know that we've got that front down in the south part of Texas, so we can check that out briefly on the soundings, maybe learn a little bit here. And that front looks pretty deep, even that far south. This is the top of the frontal inversion, so it's up at about 11,000 feet. But we're developing this southerly to southwesterly flow within that frontal layer, so that's going to start eroding it here. There's that deep layer of moisture from roughly about 2,000 up to about 6,000 feet, and that's what you saw on the video opening. Pretty much the same story at Fort Worth. You can see the top of the frontal inversion, about 8,000 feet there. So that's being scavenged out with this very strong south flow. If we had a little bit more moisture, we'd probably be able to get some thunderstorms out of this. If we go all the way up to Topeka, topping out at about 8,000 feet. And the way I'm estimating that very quickly is I know 700 millibars, that's at about 10,000 feet. I know this bottom part is right around the surface, So you can just kind of interpolate between the two. Then above that, you can see a layer of cirrus and cirrostratus up at about 20,000 feet. Then if we go all the way up to the air north of that warm front in Minneapolis, you can see this section here. This is part of the cold air mass. But north of that, an even colder air mass generating a frontal inversion there. So the front that's well to the south over Texas, the top of that frontal inversion, that's way up here near the tropopause. And then the frontal inversion we have down here, that's with a northerly front that's in Iowa and Nebraska. Okay, checking the chat here. Good to see you all were all able to join us. I was about 2 hours late, and you saw from the opening video. I went out to eat, and we saw a couple weird cars out there, and my kid says, he says they're spider cars. I've never heard of those, but they were pretty neat. And I like living in a small town in Texas like we do, because they had a lot of their stuff sitting out on the seats. If they were parked in the city, people would have probably grabbed that stuff. Lizard says his video's not working here. Refresh worked. Okay, very good. Hello, Ron. Nothing there, and then still nothing. I wonder what's up with that. Ron, yeah, try to reload if you're not getting me. Jason, working. Yeah, I guess we just kind of messed up the feed when I did that restart, so hopefully we're not going to do that again tomorrow. All right, let's head into the forecast, and we'll start with the opening GFS. Let me get that centered right there and put that on the current chart. There we go. And now you can see that system up in the northwest, or the Midwest. There's the warm front. Now it's possible you could place it a little further south based strictly on the thickness analysis. But the packing looks a little bit tighter up north, and we know from the surface analysis that's really the key right there. You got to go by that. And here you can see the temperatures, they're pretty homogeneous all the way down to Oklahoma. The real contrast is right in here, so that's where we've got to place that warm front. So basically from north of Omaha to about St. Louis. So just about like that. So you're using one chart to refine another, basically. What web page has the 300 millibar polar hemisphere animation? That's going to be Meteostar GFS. Meteostar. You can put that into Google and you can pull that up. I'm not going to bring that up for tonight, but you can certainly do that from your browser right there. And finishing off this frontal analysis, you can see it goes into the Rockies right here. And look at that, got a little bit of frontal precip north of that boundary. So everything kind of lines up right there. And the reason we have that precip, there's probably a component blowing from the front to the north like that. So they're developing a little bit of isentropic lift over that cold front. And this is what we call an anafront. That's a type of cold front, very common in the Pacific region. Here in the plains, we tend to get catafronts, and that's where we get a lot of the precip out ahead of it. And that's because the components along the front tend to be west to east, unlike what we have here, where they tend to be from the front into the cold air. So that's basically the pattern we are starting out with today. And high pressure out over the eastern U.S. That's that big dome of cold air. That's going to be sliding eastward. So if you're out in the east, you probably have a couple more days of good weather until that system makes it out here. So from Sunday evening, when we do the weathercast, then you're going to see the frontal analysis kind of looking like this. It'll be centered on Chicago, so probably kind of a snowy afternoon there. Probably Milwaukee also, out to Detroit. And now you can see a lot of that starting to spread into the Appalachians. So I guess we only have about 24 more hours of good weather. And this is being driven by high pressure in the Dakotas. See that right there? But it's only a 1022 millibar high, so we don't expect this air mass to go too far south. Going forward 24 hours into Monday. Yeah, it's hard to believe Monday's almost here. Frontal analysis looking kind of like this. So the northeast U.S. system moves off into Maine, moves very quickly, and now we've got a new low around Iowa and another one in Colorado and possibly even another one in Nevada. So kind of a chain here going on. Here's the high pressure driving that outbreak. This might be a new outbreak. I'm not too sure. I'd have to go back and look for continuity. But Texas looking under southerly flow, warm air advection, probably a good day there. Then for the Tuesday webcast, this is what we call a backdoor front in Texas. We get that when we have high pressure over the Great Lakes. That drives a northeast component into Texas. And so instead of getting a kind of a blue norther coming in from the north, we tend to get these fronts oozing in from the northeast, kind of like that. And that's what's happening here. So this is kind of the picture we're looking at across the western U.S. right there. This is driven by this large block of high pressure through here. Then let's see, for Wednesday, looks like the main high starts shifting southeastward. And of course on the east side of that high pressure area, that's where we get the strongest cold air advection. So that's going to affect mainly the northeast U.S. Very cold air, see that 492 decameter thickness heading into the Great Lakes. And since it's way off in this region, not so much for Texas and the Central Plains. We're on the wrong side. We can still get some of that backdoor cold air, but as you can see, we're going to quickly be under warm air advection. All right, so what are we looking like for Thursday? High pressure settles in over the Midwest, and now we're starting to develop that warm air advection over the plains. Cold air advection continuing in the northeast. And here comes another system. This looks like a very well-developed Pacific system right there in California. You can see a lot of rain and maybe some snow in the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevadas. Then for Friday, things coming together pretty good there in the Great Plains. Look at that. Wow, some good frontogenesis there. So let me get those lines drawn on there. Oh, you see I made a mistake right there. See the thickness lines? Those are well to the south. We are taking this front here. See, I'm kind of like following the pressure patterns, and I really need to be looking at the thickness patterns. Let me get that map back where we were. Okay, so let's try this again. Okay, now this looks a little bit better. Now we're on the right side of the thickness lines, and this is probably a little bit of a surface cyclogenesis from that upper level system. And looks like another shot there of frozen and freezing precipitation for Chicago. Good place to be if you like winter weather, because they're really getting it with this zonal, very moist storm track pattern. Saturday map looking like this. Looks like a pretty good shot of cold air coming southward now. This high is a little bit further to the west, and a pretty good band there, freezing frozen precipitation. Then for Sunday, 1 week from now, looks like that sinks southward pretty quickly, and that affects mostly the Midwest. Okay, so now we're getting out to 8 days, so things are getting a little bit more hazy. Looks like a succession of high pressures moving in from the northwest, but I do see a change up in Canada. Look at this. Actually, I lost it. Let me get back there. Okay, see what's going on there in Canada? This is kind of a different picture. Now we've got low pressure, very large low pressure, and that's going to be detrimental to Arctic air production, because that tends to bring in a shot of Pacific air coming in, a lot milder. If we get downslope flow off the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies, and that mixes out a lot of the Arctic air, so that's probably going to be a period of a little bit of a warm-up there, I think. Could just be temporary. We'll see how that goes. So, wow, yeah, lots of low pressure up to the north. So it's going to be very zonal pattern across Canada. Probably a lot of downslope, very warm weather conditions right in there. And warm air advection for Texas, too. Thursday, developing some cyclogenesis in Texas. Looks like they're trying to bring their front through the southern plains. So things are becoming overwhelmingly zonal here. But it looks like there's a pretty good block of cold Canadian air, or cold Pacific air, that starts to move inland. Because if I go forward to next Friday, Saturday, look at that, they've got a 1044 millibar high. I don't know, that looks a little suspect. You don't see too often big chunks of very cold, bitterly cold air coming in from the Pacific like that. So I'm probably going to try to take that with a little bit of grain of salt there, because we are 320 hours out. So that's the Christmas pattern right there. But overall, you know, this is kind of falling into place with what I had back on December 4th when I showed you that weird Christmas forecast and how the CFS model was showing kind of a zonal pattern. It looks like it kind of got that right. But of course the details, those are going to be kind of up in the air. And there we go with the fade out music. I think I'm probably done here for tonight. Already up to 10:17 here. Anyway, I appreciate you all joining me tonight, and we should be here at the regular time tomorrow, 8 o'clock. So have a good evening, and we'll see you then.